Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're taking a look at the data management problems that you run into when you start to use artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI. It's a growing trend. In fact, it's reshaping the data analytics sector, but it's a new area without clear standards. To discuss that, to shed some insight into that, I am joined by Krishna Subramanian, co-founder and chief operating officer at Komprise. Krishna, happy Friday to you.
Likewise, James. Nice to talk to you again.
Great. Well, I mean, I think the exciting thing is we're gonna use the phrase generative AI as we speak, and I think it's such a hot term. We get 5,000 bonus points for every time we use that term because it's so buzzy these days.
There you are, generating new content as we're speaking.
And we're doing it as humans. We're not asking the AI to do it. We're actually two humans creating new. It's very old fashioned, actually, Krishna.
Yeah.
Should we even be creating content in such an old fashioned way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. James, all jokes aside, right? I think you and I were chatting before this call. Definitely things like ChatGPT and Dolly and all of these general purpose generative AI solutions have captured our imagination because they feel like a human.
Right.
They're processing, but really what they're doing is, and not to diminish what they're doing, but they're really generating new content using very good pattern matching based on learning models that have been delivered to them. So they're pre-trained with large amounts of data. Think about a supercomputer that has access to all the data in the world up till 2021 and is able to predict, next based on the next 30 words, like what to say. When you ask it a question, it sounds really intelligent, but it is still pattern matching and it is not human. And
Right.
there are a lot of data management issues because it's really running on data. And every time you talk to it, you're giving it data. So it's really important to understand the data management impact when using generative AI.
This is slightly off topic, but I think it speaks to what we're talking about. Is that you talk about the supercomputer has all this information back to decades, all the way up to 2021. So what they're doing, they're spitting out content, but really it's pattern matching. But it is pretty amazing. ChatGPT and other generative AI applications are creating essays, poetry. I've read some of the little poetry that ChatGPT has written. It is a kind of creativity. It's not just spitting out information. It's actually it is creating something.
Yeah, I think it almost sounds philosophical when you start talking about these things, because what is creativity? How much
Right.
of it is new versus derived from what is already there?
Right.
But yeah, it sounds extremely intelligent. It sounds extremely creative because language does follow certain patterns. And if you have combed through so much information and you can process so much information and you can pattern match, significantly far ahead,
Mm-hmm.
what you're putting together sounds very, very coherent. But we do have to understand what its boundaries are.
Mm-hmm.
And where, especially, I think as it concerns data ownership, data privacy, data security, and data leakage. I mean, these are all significant areas where companies that are built based on proprietary IP could find themselves either being sued for stuff that they never thought they would be liable for,
Right. Right.
or share leakage of what they would have considered proprietary IP. So.
Well, I mean, it really brings us to our core topic, which is that combining data management and AI is definitely a growing trend. It's going out across the industry, but there aren't really clear standards. I mean, it's unclear exactly what the best practices are. So, what are the potential problems here?
We call this SPLOG, SPLOG, and I'll explain why in a second. But we really think there are 5 areas related to data that you should think about before you tell your employees to go and use generative AI. And the 5 areas of SPLOG are security, privacy, lineage, ownership, and governance.
Uh-huh.
And I can walk through them if you want, James,
Sure.
quickly.
Well,
Yeah.
let's do kind of a nutshell, if you would.
Sure. So data security, I think it's extremely important when you authorize the use of generative AI that you know what the legal agreements are with that company, because basically some company is giving you a pre-trained model, and when you ask it a question and you give it some information in your prompt, you may not know this, but that data may belong to that company now, and they may be able to use it elsewhere.
Right.
This is what happened to Samsung, when they told their engineers they could use they could try using generative AI because they kind of wanted to see what happens. And
Right.
very innocuously, an engineer just gave a code and said, find me the problems in this code,
Oh,
not realizing that that meant the code leaked into the public domain.
yeah, a major problem because
Yeah.
confidential information was giving up at that moment.
Yeah, so data security is extremely important, and knowing, how you can share your data, and using data management to segregate the domain of that data so that data stays in a private domain, not in the public domain, is
Hmm.
important. The second issue is with data privacy.
Hmm.
Because these models are pre-trained, they may be trained on sensitive data or even PII data, though they try to avoid it. You don't know, because sometimes they don't share with you all the sources that they trained their model on. And so, if you're a hospital and you're bound by HIPAA and you're using a pre trained model that might be using some PII data, you may end up being liable for violating HIPAA.
Hmm.
And even worse, you may be using a commercial backup solution that may be using a pre-trained model to spot anomalies. And if it is using PII data, you may be liable just by being a buyer of that solution. So
Hmm.
it's really important to understand data privacy. The third thing is leakage, is lineage of data. Because these things have pre-trained models, you have to know where that data came from. Google actually published the sources of its training model, and Washington Post reviewed them. And I think they found like 45% of those sources were what were considered unverified.
Ah,
So they may be false, they may be, not, they're just not verified. But
right.
if you're using that bot as your pre-trained model, you may not be getting accurate information. So that's really important.
Can I ask a question about that? I understand that it's not verified, and take quite a good chunk of it is not verified. But I'm going to guess that if we look ahead a year, a couple of years, that situation is going to change, and more of the information that the bots are churning out will be verified because the technology will improve.
Yeah, I think it is not only an issue of whether it's verified or not. There may also be bias in the data. And so, is it the kind of bias you want, or are you even knowledgeable of what the bias is?
Right.
Also, I think there needs to be an understanding of what you're using it for. I think, I think you and I were talking about this before, James. AI has been around for a while. Generative AI is really a part of AI. Uh,
Right.
and generative AI is good at these natural language tasks, but it may not be good at things where you want factual accuracy, because it's actually generating content and it's not deterministic. So every time you
Right.
ask it a question, it may give you a different answer. So
Right.
it's
Right.
very hard to verify its answers. So you may want to use it only for like conversational things, but the actual places where you need accurate facts, use a different kind of AI for that. So that's
That's a
why,
really, yeah. Go ahead, please.
yeah, so that's why data lineage is extremely important. Can you track lineage of data, and can you verify its authenticity?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and then ownership. When you derive some works based on it, who owns those works? Who is liable for that?
Hmm.
How do you even know that you're the owner? I mean, are you unwittingly made an owner of something?
Right.
And then governance of all of these things. Because if you're in a regulated industry, you have to show that you followed all the regulations. When you use AI, how do you track governance? Again, data management can actually help you with all these problems, but it starts with awareness. I think a lot of people don't even realize that these are problems today.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole idea of AI governance, which is a new field, I mean, it's a field that needs to grow to encompass all the challenges it's going to face. That's a hot area, AI governance.
Yes.
Let's look. I mean, so companies are struggling with these big issues. What advice do you give companies that that are want to guard against data security problems with AI?
I think the first thing is to create some policies internally. First of all, I would advise any company to not put anything in commercial production right now that is built on generative AI.
Too early for that, you mean?
I feel it is too early. I feel you have to first create a sandbox where you try it and you understand it better.
Uh-huh.
Because I think a lot of people, it is so tempting, James. I mean, honestly, we have our own sandbox and we've been trying it out. Like you said, it's amazing at generating content, right?
Hmm.
But
Right.
not only that, even if you ask it to generate code, and you give it pretty precise instructions, it's remarkably accurate, the code that it delivers. And it's so tempting if you're a company and you don't have to hire that many people, or you are resource constrained, you're a startup, you have
Sure.
to build something fast. Why not use this, right? It
Hmm.
is so tempting to use this right away. But I would caution against that, and to create a sandbox first and to understand these data governance issues. Because I think the concern for a company is not only that there may be some malicious bad actor, but really, I think you may end up being liable for things that
Right.
you didn't even realize you're liable for.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think the question of what advice do you give to companies is probably a 4-hour answer. I want to make sure, did you want to add anything to that particular issue, like what advice you give for the data problems?
Yeah, for the data problems, I would honestly say, think about these 5 areas, security, privacy, lineage, ownership, and governance. And, people like ourselves, we can help. I mean, if you want to understand the data in a sandbox, if you want to understand how it's being used, you know, a data management solution can give you analytics that shows you how your users are using, what data is being put where.
Hmm.
I would definitely say you have to put guardrails before you actually use anything like this in production.
Right. So even that sandbox idea you're talking about, it would be a good idea to start with a sandbox, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
let's get to the role. I mean, how does Comprise your company? How does Comprise play a role in this issue?
We're still learning, James, and I'd be lying if I said, yeah, we've solved these 5 problems.
Yeah, that's
Nobody,
honest of you. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
I don't think anybody can say that right now. I think what we can do, the role we can play is, basically AI relies on unstructured data. So
Hmm.
all the data that you're talking about that AI is using, it's not data in databases. It's data in the internet, and it's data, videos and images and documents. All of that's unstructured.
Right.
And so, and knowing, analyzing what data is being used, where, by whom, how your data is getting shared, what access controls you can put in place, moving large amounts of data into a learning model and back out. All of these are basically data management problems that companies like ourselves, that's what Comprise does. We analyze, we move, and we audit, the movement of unstructured data. And
Mhm.
basically, those are the problems that are related to AI. But there is market specific stuff for AI that you have to do.
A really interesting point you made about the fact that AI relies on unstructured data, all that material from the internet, memes, videos, all sorts of things that are not necessarily that are not structured. I mean, I guess actually artificial intelligence is freely mixing structured and unstructured in its data reservoir, correct?
Yes, it
Yeah.
really is. Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess if you have you're not going to get too far if you're only using the structured material. You have to be using the unstructured to really have a full-fledged AI application.
Yeah, if you yes, you have to, because even if you wanted, like if you wanted to read your manuals and try to help, write meaningful answers to user questions, you're giving it your user manuals. Those are that's unstructured. So yeah, it's not going to be very helpful to you if you don't use unstructured data.
Well, I think that the big question is the future of combining data management and artificial intelligence. That's going to be a hot area in the years ahead. People are going to be really struggling with that. Give us your predictions or your forecast, Christian. I mean, how do you see the sector evolving?
I think that a few things are needed. So first of all, standards are definitely needed, and European Union already is creating some, and the US is starting to create some, which is all good. But then, products have to evolve. Today, there's not that much talk about the data. We're still kind of excited about what these solutions can do. But I think that has to change, and data management has to be front and center, because you're dealing with data with all these solutions. So I think where this will evolve is there'll be a tighter collaboration and a tighter understanding of the data management for AI. And there will be a regulated framework inside which these solutions operate.
You actually think there will be a regulated framework, I mean, issued by government bodies? Who will create that regulated framework?
I think government has to create that framework, because anytime, I mean, you think about it, you're creating a drug, or or banking, in any industry where there's general purpose applicability, that there's a potential for great benefit and great harm. You need regulation in those industries. Generative AI is like that. So it needs regulation.
I mean, I guess my skepticism about that is that private industry is so well financed and it moves so quickly, and government tends to be not as well financed and not as staffed with experts who are in technology specifically. So my fear is that private industry is going to run circles around government, and private industry doesn't really want to be regulated, and it will be able to get away with not being seriously regulated by the government.
You're right. I mean, I think it's definitely a situation where we have to change how we have operated in some ways. Regulation has to come really fast, and it's uncharted territory. But I think, James, the fact that so many business leaders wrote an open letter to the government. I mean, how often do you see people in companies saying, "Go ahead and regulate us"?
True. That was a rare moment. It felt like they were talking into the wind a little bit, because I don't think, and it was all those leaders saying we need to slow this down, but I don't think it has slowed down. So it was a nice moment. I'm not sure how much effect that really had. I want to believe it does, but I'm still kind of doubtful.
Well, what is going to happen, and it's already happening, is probably there'll be some kind of de facto standards that businesses start adhering to on their own. And then regulation will also have to be created. But I do believe you need regulation for this. You cannot not have it.
No, I totally agree. I think we desperately need regulation for this, and I hope we get it. Krishna, you said it. A lot of good stuff as always. I appreciate your brilliance and sharing your insight, and I hope you come back and talk with us again sometime. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Thanks for having me on.